Welcome back. While many moments in history have paved the way for equality, we are going to focus on something a little different today.
Yes, our resident folklorist, I should say, Shane Lahan is here, and he says that one item in particular was central to the radical change that took place in women's rights for independence. It might be what you think. The bicyclette. The bicyclette. And Shane, you might come to the couch as a treat.
Yeah.
Oh, fair play to you. Fair play to you.
Well, there you are, lads.
Shane,
what an entrance you have to say.
And that was very well done now, you see. In a studio floor, it's not as easy on a high nelly as you might think.
I would take any opportunity to be on my bicycle. I just love my
cycling,
bicycle.
Yeah.
But you know, you're quite right, Maura. I think the bicycle is the most underestimated aspect, particularly for women, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, in my little book, The Old Ways to New Days, one of the things I did is I wrote a full chapter just on the bicycle, how it changed Irish life, but particularly how it changed women's life as well. And you know, the more I think about it, it's kind of like the feeling of freedom. I call it the freedom machine, okay?
It's true, you feel it yourself when you're cycling and the wind in your hair or whatever.
Up on the bike, up on the saddle, looking at the trees, looking at the birds. But go back, the bicycle wasn't always available to women. And to understand that, we kind of go right back to the beginning. The bike actually is relatively new. 1815 was the year of an eruption, a volcanic eruption in Indonesia, Mount Tamura. And what happened is it put all the stuff into the air, it blotted out the sun, and the following year, 1816, was known as the year without a summer, okay? And it was all the crops failed, all the horses had nothing to eat. And because of that, a man called Karl von Drais, he developed what he called, I suppose, the dandy horse, later on it became, or the hobby horse, which was literally like a child's balance bike. Here's one that...
Oh God, it's a very rudimentary thing, isn't it?
And it was made by carpenters, it was made by blacksmiths, 2 old wheels on it, and so on. But it became very popular. And the reason it's called the dandy horse is because in London and in Paris, all the fast walkers, as they were called, they were all going around, there were clubs joined for all of this sort of activity. So the bicycle, I feel like, was born from that particular period of time.
Yeah.
And what I find really interesting is that the women really were, they were allowed to use them as well. But essentially the tricycle came in, okay? And they used to actually sit on the tricycle because it was better for them to be sitting on a seat, if you follow me, okay? And again, so quite often what would happen is that the woman might be on the front of the tricycle and the men would go, because the women were, it was considered to be too, what will I say? Too physical. Women were meant to be frail, they were meant to be sit down. And of course their dresses and all of those sort of things didn't lend itself to cycling at all.
No, it didn't. Well, it didn't lend itself to horses either, unless they were side saddle, let's be honest.
Exactly, and they went side saddle. So being on a bicycle was something that was looked down upon.
Worse even, be difficult. You couldn't be side saddle on the bike.
It's interesting that you mentioned the horse, okay? Because really, I suppose, look, there they are, going around as it were. They still have their dresses on at this point in time.
But are they cycling them, or are they kind of push bikes, or what are they?
They're the fast walkers. They would sit down and they would kind of freewheel.
Oh my
God, that must have been difficult if you think it. They look very delicate, those bikes, compared to the robust bikes we have now.
But one of the things that happens anyway is that the next thing that happens is that the men loved the horses, okay? And they wanted to go fast, okay? What they called scorching. They loved scorching, was as fast as you go. And they found out that the bigger the front wheel of a bicycle, the faster you could go. And hence what appears then is what you and I would know as the penny farthing.
That's the most famous kind of bike,
And so the bigger the front wheel, the faster the bike will go.
Absolutely.
I never know that.
And it was called the ordinary. And I'll tell you why it was called the ordinary, because later on we have the safety bike. But this was the ordinary. It was also called, Dahi, the extraordinary, because sometimes they put an extension on, the wheel got bigger again, they had extensions on the pedals, and fellas were absolutely helter-skelter, going as
keeping
fast
up with a horse.
Literally, and they were as high as a horse, because being up high, you didn't want to be down low. Being up high meant an awful lot in the society at this time.
But the roads weren't great that time.
No, not at all.
What did they say? They were balancing on. They were almost cycling on the wheel, weren't they?
And Dahi, let me tell you, the accounts we have of the injuries that come from this is absolute. Because once you hit a pothole or once you hit a stone, literally there was no protection. You went straight down and smash, like head injuries.
Rubber on the wheels, Shane. Was there rubber on those wheels?
No. And
what was on? Just metal.
Literally, they were iron bands. Okay, you might have had a rubber band going on, but there was no tires yet, no inflatable pneumatic tires. Okay, so bone shakers, as they were called. Okay. Okay, so you had the ordinary, and you also had what we call the velocipede, which is the kind of the fast bicycle and so on. So the major changes came then in and around 1880s, the 1880s, because we got the development of what we called the safety bicycle to kind of counter the danger that was coming with the penny farthing that was there. And the safety bicycle had a few, more or less what we think of as a bicycle today. So it had, Dunlop came in with his pneumatic tires, so all of a sudden it was much better. You had what we call the diamond frame, and in addition to that you had the crank with the chain and all of that.
Yeah.
And very importantly, you had a brake. A lot of the guys...
No, they didn't have brakes before.
No, it was kind of more macho not to have a break, they enjoyed that. And then this guy, Kem Stanley, he comes along, he invents what more or less you and I would call the bicycle. And this opens up everything, and it opens up for women in particular, because now you have a change coming. This is something they can get onto, and it changes, specifically it changes their dress, because up to now, the big dresses, the corsets that were the corsets that we were wearing went right down and went through the waist and down. So now the corsets were brought up to the waist. Okay, they were now wearing their bloomers, as they were called. Okay, and you had the invention of what was called rational dress. Okay, rational because it made sense to be on a bicycle like this. And we have all these cartoons.
So when are we talking about here? Early
1900s? 1880s,
1880s,
1889, that kind of period of time.
Yeah.
Like you can see this guy here. He's looking at. He says it's important for ladies or for men to take off their hats as they go into church, but of course they're not men. They're women wearing the rational dress.
Yeah.
So you have this extraordinary sort of period of time, and a woman wearing rational dress was considered to be mannish.
It was kind of revolutionary time too, wasn't it?
It was incredible, and women themselves felt this empowerment and decided to use the bicycle as a statement of their independence and to move away from what the control what the men had at the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually radical. It opened up and it was the Belle Epoque as well. You know, I think some of the posters I've seen, I've collected over time. There's some extraordinary posters advertising directly to women, like the Gladiator, which is a Parisian.
Incredible.
See this one?
It is. It's incredible.
Who's this aimed at now, Shane?
I love.
She's like a goddess, though. That's the
She
cool
is.
thing.
And you're absolutely right. This is a kind of a new movement. And when I look at that
Freedom.
poster, you can see the freedom. You can see the wings that are there, her hair going out.
Yeah.
Like it really emphasizes what is going on in the women's perspective. And you know what? It was driven by commerce as well, because they were advertising to the women.
For the first time,
Up to now, it was just one market, men only, but now you doubled the market by bringing it out to women as well, which is extraordinary.
But even when you look at it in a transport context, even at that time as well, say somebody leaving, say, West Kerry or Galway or Donegal, it's like all of a sudden Dublin is only probably a day and a half away or a day away, you know?
Listen, and what happened then, Dahi, is that there began cycling clubs.
Yeah.
Okay, so up to now, you couldn't move anywhere. You didn't go anywhere.
Right.
And women in particular didn't go anywhere because they were under the control of the men. They had to get permission. Now, all of a sudden, they were meeting up. Nina, 1888, was the first all-women's cycling club. And they used to organise a picnic, and they'd all go off. They mightn't go very far, but it began this process. And one of the things I really like, and I brought in an example as well. And by the way, the bicycle I cycled in on today, I got that from the Blarney men's shed.
Yeah.
Okay, we're talking about the women's.
It's a lovely
men's
bike.
shed,
So it's a high Nelly.
Yeah, and Tony Barron, this gorgeous man, got that for me.
And does he still cycle it, Tony?
No, not Tony doesn't, but the lads in the men's shed, they do them up and do that. But he also gave me this, because I think this is another item which shows us the independence of women. And this was the box brownie. Okay, this was developed in America in the late 1890s or thereabouts. Kodak brings it in.
It's a camera,
from 1900, what happens? It's a camera, exactly. And it's the first, if you look in there, you can click it here and the little shutter opens. In the back here, you would have had where the film was, all of that sort of thing inside. But you think about this for a moment. You think about the modern age, all the photographs we take on our phones, all the independence, right? For the first time, people were taking photographs, and women were taking photographs.
This is so funny, Brownie. I didn't know the history of the box brownie because for my communion I got a brownie camera. They were all the rage in the 70s. They were all seriously. I remember having this little brownie camera, and it was such a thing to take photos with your film, and you know.
And think about that for a moment. Up to now, it's been the preserve of the elite, and the elite by transport, as you say, Dahi, was a preserve of if you had. Now this is autonomy, autonomy for photographs, autonomy
They were
for
capturing
cycling.
moments in their lives. They
Yeah.
were ruling their own lives.
It's incredible. So for me, when we're thinking about International Women's Day, I think about what are the items that changed people's lives,
Yeah.
and I think it's absolutely huge. One of the great sort of ideas as well that I think is that the men weren't too delighted with this. There was a thing called bicycle face. And bicycle face I came across in some research was that this was kind of propaganda that the men had, that women who were on bicycles, if the wind would blow into their face, and there was these cartoons of women who looked quite bedraggled, their hair everywhere and so on, and they're saying, be careful, don't get bicycle face if
This
you're a
could
woman.
happen to you.
Yeah, this could happen
Oh
to you
my
if you're on the bicycle too
God.
much. But to be honest, the idea of the bike coming in, think of our fight for independence.
Yeah.
Think of Coming them On, for
Yeah.
example. Think of all of our flying columns and so on. But think of all the dispatches that were sent by bicycle, people going to places, going to dances. I particularly
But
interested.
even when you're coming in then to the war, to the First World
Yeah.
War, I mean, women were really needed.
Yes.
And then they could cycle, they could do
Yeah.
all these things so that they were part and parcel.
This
And,
was like
yeah.
having a horse when you couldn't. The horse that eats no hay. The
Yeah.
iron horse, as
The
it
iron
was
horse,
called.
yeah.
There was one great figure. When we're talking about independent women and so on. There's one figure called Annie Londonderry,
Right.
and she was a woman who cycled around the world, believe it or not, on a wager. Now she sounds like she might be Irish, but she's not. But you were talking here about 1894 thereabouts. A wager. Could she cycle around the world in less than 15 months? When she started off, she was in the dress. Very quickly, she moved from Chicago to Boston and so on. Eventually, she got the ferry, but she did make it, and she made a fortune out of it. And she was
Was she
celebrated.
American?
She was. Yeah, she was. She came over. She was an immigrant from Latvia originally, but she was a superstar. And to me, if we're thinking about women and trailblazers, to use that term, Annie
She's one of them.
Londonderry is definitely one that
You
we
wouldn't
can be
forget that
thinking
name,
about.
either, would you?
That looks like a fairly decent bike, to be fair.
To be honest, she started off with a bike that was way too heavy altogether.
Yeah.
And in fact, the story goes that she couldn't actually cycle at all at the beginning. She was a bit of a chancer, to be honest, right? And she was making money along the way, getting sponsorship.
Of course she
used to tie things onto the back of the bike for
Advertising.
advertising.
Love it.
And she made it right across. She went across on the ferry. She spent a lot of time on trains and on boats, so she
Oh, did she?
cycled the whole
Oh,
lot.
sneaky
Yeah.
little.
But she did cycle along the railway tracks, which I
Yeah.
kind of love. When you
That'd be
think,
fierce bumpy though.
yeah, I thought that as well. But by all accounts, they were
Say the
new-
road
new
was
enough,
probably
they were-
worse.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
it was the best way to go, and she could stop off having food, and she knew where she was going as well because the roads weren't.
Sure.
There
Right.
was
Yeah.
We didn't have
Yeah, yeah.
no
GPS.
sat navs, yeah. When you think
Oh,
about
that's an
it.
incredible
No,
story.
it's incredible. So I love to celebrate that. I love to think about all the independence that was given, particularly, let's say, I go back to the dances for a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have lots of stories about people who cycle to matches and cycle great distances, as you were
Yeah.
saying. But I love the idea that lads used to be coming from faraway places to a dance that wasn't there before. So now, to use that term, the pickings were greater.
Yeah.
The lads were going. It revolutionised our society and how people interacted.
Yeah.
Well, my dad had a high nelly like that when we were kids. And he put a little saddle on the front.
Yeah.
So one of us would sit on the front and hold the inside of the bars while the other was on the carrier.
Very good.
And that's, when I see those bikes, they're amazing, aren't
Yeah.
they? They're just so cool.
And I love the idea of the crossbar as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Many
Oh,
a
sure.
dance you brought someone home in the crossbar.
Many marriages
Yeah,
happened.
and you were whispering in the sweet nothings.
Yeah, or even the bar on the bike there, you'd have a pain in your behind from sitting on it though if you were going
Oh, you
4 or
would.
5 miles.
Oh,
Get
this-
used to it after a while.
It's better than walking, I suppose. Anyway.
Shane, thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
putting a
Shane.
spotlight on
Not
that. We
our
didn't
fault.
realise half of it. It's wonderful. Thanks so much again. Now, just enough time, of course, to announce the